Because, Katherine, there is only one story that is dominating the second editions of all of the papers, and that is the extraordinary, almost unbelievable assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Tom. It is incredible, isn't it? You know, we went to bed last night oblivious. I woke up at 6 o'clock. It was the first thing I heard. And seeing the footage, it is so shocking, isn't it? Because he missed death, frankly, by a few millimeters, didn't he? You could see that it obviously went through his ear. He bent his head just a fraction just before the bullets were fired. And watching it back, the panic, the uproar, and then him on the ground, you know, behind the podium for quite a few seconds, then his security services, when they knew that the shooter had been taken out, getting him up. But you hear him say, wait, wait. And then you see him putting his fist in the air, pumping the air with his fist. Even in that moment where he nearly died, even just a few seconds later, he had the wherewithal within him to realise how this looked and what an incredible opportunity this was for him to emerge triumphant, putting his fist in the air and all the cheering from the crowd. Now, thank goodness he is alive. But of course, one person has been tragically killed. 2 others are critically injured in hospital. So a terrible, terrible tragedy. French President Emmanuel Macron has been putting on X, saying it is a tragedy for our democracies. And I think there's going to be huge questions going forward for the security services in the United States, because,
well, Katherine,
yes,
we can see him sort of struggling against his security here, almost, in this sort of big show of defiance. Holding up his hand, he said the word fight 3 times, and then holding up his hand again as he's bundled into the car. This is the sort of political instinct that can't be taught. The idea that this image was created of him standing defiantly, fist aloft, rather than, it's incredibly easy to imagine another scenario where he didn't struggle back against his security, where he didn't hold his fist up, as we're seeing on our screens now, and instead the front pages of all the second editions of our papers, the images shown on TV, are him cowering or clutching his face, or a less defiant image. These are images that are going to last for the ages.
Yes, indeed, he is. Whatever you may think of him, and he's very divisive, many people love him, lots of others loathe him, but he is the ultimate showman, and even narrowly escaping death, he thought to do that, and that image. And, you know, I suspect, sure, it's taken the focus off Joe Biden and his mental faculties, but I suspect that this will play incredibly well for Donald Trump, because, you know, he has emerged triumphant from this. So, but my goodness, it was within a couple of millimeters of a very different outcome. And I think it just does stress, you know, what a febrile environment there is in politics in the United States and here too. Politicians are public figures. They are in a lot of danger. And, you know, even with the best security you would think in the world, even Donald Trump was not kept safe.
No. Well, I think it's important to reflect on the statement that Mr. Trump has shared on his Truth social media network. He said, "Most importantly, I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person that was injured badly. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper right part of my ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong, in that I heard a whizzing sound. Shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realised then what was happening." Just a part of the statement that Donald Trump released last night. And reading those words, it is extraordinary.
Absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you couldn't have come any closer to death than he did, and yet he got up and he thought, how this is going to look, how can I use this, how can I capitalise on this? But I think, yes, worth bearing in mind, there is a family that has tragically lost somebody dear to them, other people very ill in hospital, and there will be many people who were in that audience thinking they are incredibly lucky to be alive, and I would imagine massively traumatised by what happened.
Absolutely, and no doubt some huge questions of the security services as well. How was a shooter able to get this close? We'll be speaking to Sebastian Gorka, the former advisor to Donald Trump in the White House, a little bit later in the programme. But perhaps we should return to some more domestic matters here. There's a piece in the Sunday Times entitled "The Great Blame Game." Now, this is all about the Labour Party sort of trying to perhaps hype up how bad an inheritance they got ahead of the King's speech on Wednesday.
Yes, indeed. Well, we all remember, don't we, the note that Labour left for the incoming coalition government in 2010 saying there's no money left. Well, Darren Jones, the new Treasury Minister, has said things are so bad that the Conservatives can't afford the notepaper, that they couldn't even afford the notepaper to write a similar message. But yes, the incoming government's fundamental message is that Britain is broken, that things are terribly bad. Rachel Reeves has stressed, the new Chancellor, that she's inherited the worst economic legacy since the Second World War. And they're going to go to town on this because, of course, it's going to constrain massively what they are able to do. Now, we've already seen the prisons crisis erupting, with the news that prisoners are going to be released even earlier. That's only just over a week in to this new administration. So now Pat McFadden, who is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has instructed all cabinet ministers to set about delving into their inheritance, finding sort of unexploded bombs, potential problems, and he's asked for that information by the end of next week. And they are also on the second anniversary of Liz Truss's mini budget. They've already got that in their calendars. They're going to really make hay with that too. And of course, they're being helped, I suspect, by the fact that Liz Truss has written a piece today saying that the reason the Conservatives were defeated is basically that Rishi Sunak trashed her legacy. Now, she believes that. I think there's a lot of people would take a rather different view, but the Conservatives, in the meantime, are basically eating themselves, fighting very publicly. One leadership candidate, potentially Kemi Badenoch, accusing another, Suella Braverman, of being close to having a public nervous breakdown. Things are pretty dreadful in the Conservative camp at the moment. Labour, of course, are riding high with a massive majority, but they have got very tough decisions coming, and they're going to be sure to try and pin as many of those as possible on the Conservatives.
Yeah, call me a cynic, but this call from Pat McFadden for people to go and find all of the worst bits possible, perhaps even exaggerate how bad things might well be. I'm looking at some of the statistics here. I mean, looking at the deficit that the country has right now, it's less than half of that the country had in 2010. Trying to say that there is less room for spending now than there was in 2010 does really seem to take the biscuit.
Well, we do have a national debt of, about 2.7 trillion. I mean, it is monumentally big, but I think worth saying, sure, they've got a very difficult economic legacy. However, and the economy is beginning to turn a corner. We're out of recession. There is expected that interest rates will come down. Inflation has come down. Things are beginning to get better. And of course, this is why so many Conservatives and indeed advisors were horrified when Rishi Sunak called the election when he did, because they thought, just give it a few more months and things will start to look better. Now, things will start to look better, but the Labour government is going to be able to take the credit for that. And I would say one of those things likely to be a dramatic fall in the levels of net migration. And that will be as a direct result of decisions that Rishi Sunak made.
Now, Katherine, of course, there is another story in the Sunday Times today, and it's one you've written. Yes. So a week ago,
was my birthday, but I was actually at Heathrow Airport exactly this time a week ago, waiting for my 2 eldest sons to come back from a 9-week trip. But I should have been outside Downing Street on the Friday reporting on the general election results, but I wasn't because, as you can see from that picture, my 2 eldest sons, in their infinite wisdom, had decided to take a hike up the highest mountain in Bali to see the sunrise in the middle of the night. They'd followed an app that said it was a 7-hour round trip. It was a trail that, in fact, had fallen out of use years ago. They were ill-equipped. They got lost. They ran out of water, though they managed to collect water. They were gone for 2 nights and 2 days. They were eventually rescued. They used their scout survival skills, their Bear Grylls, TV watching to help them. They were eventually rescued, but they are incredibly lucky to be alive. And the reason I've written about this in the Sunday Times, they've taken down the paywall for it. And also we gave our first interview to Eamon and Isabel on GBNews Breakfast last week, is basically to spread the word to other families and young people who are going travelling that you are not invincible. Now, I know that the children's brains, teenage brains, don't finally sort of finish evolving till their mid-20s. But I think often young people, and sometimes boys particularly, do sort of think that they are invincible, take the attitude that it'll be fine. And, you know, sometimes people come very seriously unstuck. Now, I am incredibly lucky that my son's at home, but it could have ended very differently. So that's why.
It was an incredibly moving story. And that interview with Eamon and Isabel last week was incredibly moving as well. Katherine, it's a fascinating story. It's a tragic story, but it's also a story of hope. And what you've written is incredible. And thank you so much for talking through it with us today. Really appreciate your time this morning.